So here our main flag forward, we're going to try to accomplish. A flag forward is a concept you should know we use here a lot. It's sort of like a goal you set, whatever it is, metaphysical goals and physical goals, and that when you get it, you go, yay, I got it, and you feel like a hero. So anyway, our flag forward today is to try to define for everyone in Podler theory what a spirit or spirit form is. Because it's a bit complex and it involves quite a few things, but once you see it, it actually is really just one thing. So let's start with what the one thing is. In short, spirit forms can be thought of as patterns, clusters of behavior in a very concrete way to just energy or instincts. So behavior, instincts, energy. But either way, they're intangible, but they are there. So for example, when a tiger is born, or a hippo is born, or a monkey or anything else, let's say there's three animals right there, they have physiological differences. Clearly, the hands and the feet and the way they're built in the structural way. But anyone who studies those animals will tell you that there's also a lot of more psychological differences. The animals have a psychology, and so a tiger's psychology is suited towards it being what it is. So not just the mouth and the legs and the claws and everything, but the psychology of it. Okay, well, what is that psychology that all humans and animals have? Well, it's simply, when you look at the understanding continuum, once you go to that midpoint and beyond, tacit and beyond, you're talking about things that the human eye and the human consciousness can't really hold on to, but they can be held on to by the psyche. That's so right at tacit, you're going beyond concrete that you can concretely hold. So in order to hold it, it needs to be held by faculties, powers, abilities, whatever you want to call it, resources of the psyche that's not in the conscious mind. Does that make sense? So if people aren't familiar with this basic concept, it should be familiar from a lot of schools of thought, that the conscious mind is a much, much, much smaller portion of the unconscious mind or psyche or soul or whatever you want to call it. But that phenomenon, that we are an island within a vast, vast, nearly infinite ocean. Okay, that's why you can do various techniques for studying or athletic visioning events you're going to do, seeing yourself there, self-actualization, that kind of stuff. What you're doing is you're tapping into the spirit forms. Now, I'll divide them up into two major categories for right now, which is spirit forms that are learned and spirit forms that are part of your wiring and part of your how you're built you uniquely. So in the understanding continuum, at component and concrete, you're basically talking about skills, concrete, and parts of skills or whatever abilities in component. So those do not tend to have very much spirit forming to them because they're not much more than just themselves. However, when you go to tacit usually comes in, for example, when you've done something maybe many, many times. Here's a simple way, like your piano playing or whatever. There's a lot of ability where your hands and your body just wants to go that way. Okay, now let's take about that. Piano's a classic one, so you're being moved there. Scientifically, I'm sure we could actually go into her body while she's doing that, and we can break it down into the muscles. There's some muscle memory there, and you can track them back even to certain chemicals get released. But once you keep tracking back, there's always going to be a point at which you cannot track these forms, like Plato's forms, that are affecting you. In the case of the piano playing, that might be easy to see because you learned it. Okay, you did not know what a piano was. Humans have lived a long time without having pianos. So that was something she learned to have that tacit ability. Okay, you keep taking it up further to the art level and then to spiritual. But there are spirit forms that don't have to go up that ladder in that way. And these are spirit forms that actually were born with. This, for example, is, let's take piano playing versus dexterous interplay between digits and mind. That sounds a bit complex there, but just try to grab it again, please. Dexterous interplay between the mind and the fingers doing something. I'll even go so far as to say those two together while in some sort of rhythm. The uses of that way of being are so vast, so infinite, that they have been evolving in us since the beginning. So I'm pretty sure that was something that the early tree swinging versions of us needed. So that has continued to evolve into a great many things before humans had language, and then humans got language, and then they got all these other things, and they had ancient civilizations, and then they have now modern civilizations. So in the modern civilizations, the piano arose, so to speak. You know, maybe in ancient time instruments, and then modern time more modern instruments, but still that came rather late. However, the spirit form of dexterous interplay between hands and mind to a rhythm can be locked onto that. It can be locked onto piano playing. And if you can do that, it will be very powerful. Spirit forming right there is that. There are all kinds of abilities, such as being a healer, a mother, a lover, a hunter, a person running for their life. Okay, these are spirit forms. If you can tap into them, it's much more powerful than your conscious abilities. You can get unbelievable insights and energies and the ability to push your body and mind beyond what you thought were your limits, because those limits are really your conscious mind's limits. But you actually have many more abilities in your unconscious mind. And the way to talk with them at their higher levels is as spirit forms, because that's how it'll appear to you. You might be thinking, what exactly does that mean? It kind of sounds like you're saying, well, let me tell you what I'm saying it is. Spirit forming is basically channeling. The ability to go from the conscious mind to the unconscious mind and bring greater resources into the conscious mind. But channeling cannot be done in a very academic way. So right off the bat, if you want to get very academic about it, it doesn't work well like that. Okay, I'll be more zen about it. Okay, you can go zen, but one thing you should be aware of is at the highest level there is a dialoguing aspect. There's no way around that. And I'm going to give you some terms here. These are not mine. These are some different fields. Spirits, talking to spirits. Okay. Inner voices, inner guides, archetypes, instincts and moods, within the context that instincts and moods can tap you on the shoulder and talk to you, which many a cop talks in that language. I'm not making this up. This isn't even metaphysical stuff. That's cop talk. Altered states, in the psychedelic sense, but also in the self-induced altered states. And you're like, well, that's bad. No, altered states is why people win Olympic gold medals. So altered states, really cool. Modes of being, like, oh man, I was in that mode, and you know how I am when I'm in that mode? Oh, and I was in that mode. You know how it is when I get in that mode. What is that? What is this ability to move you around? I'm gonna start using this word now. Autonomous entities, another one I've heard thrown around. People have autonomous entities in their unconscious. You do. Self-dialoguing, method acting, the work. In most of the method acting practices, you start basically treating yourself as like a little personal troupe of characters. And you can talk to them within yourself, you can actually put them in chairs that aren't, no one's really there, and talk to them, and this is a very powerful practice. Using art or a muse as your inner guide, talking to a muse. Well, that's okay, that's art. It's no different. All these things I'm saying are the exact, everything I just said is spirit forming. And finally, communing and praying. That's no different. So everything I just said, channeling energies, greater energies, talking to spirits, talking to inner voices, inner guides, archetypes, instincts and moods, ones that can actually talk to you, altered states, modes of being, autonomous entities, self-dialoguing, method acting, inner muse, communing, praying. All spirit forming. That's just different names for the same thing. And not exactly the same thing, sometimes different portions of the same thing, but they're basically playing with that language and trying to get parts of it right. Okay, so there are, for us, a smooth continuum of the spirit forms and how they can be used, but there's a big demarcation in the ones like your piano playing that you learn this lifetime. So they're there, but for one thing, they can be incorrect. So for example, let's say she's playing piano one way, and then it turns out that playing piano a different way is the better way. So now her way isn't the best way anymore. So these are what we call meme spirit forms. These are spirit forms that were developed in a lifetime. So you have kind of like ghosts of experience or repetition or things like that. Okay. And they are powerful because they can help you play the piano really well. But they also are limited, being meme only, not ones that you were evolved to have, in that should the style of playing change or this or that, perhaps you get a different piano. Does that make sense? And the skill on this other piano is, say, what do you call those, the parlor sized? Studio pianos. Okay, so you have to adjust some, and that means that other way of doing it is a bit off. So it's helpful when you're doing that, but you may have to relax its authority when you try something new. Now, there is a spirit form that's behind that and is also involved, and that would be the one of dexterous interplay between hands, mind, to a rhythm. That she was born with, as we all are, and it's one that's never wrong. It's never wrong to tickle yourself in such a way that a spirit forms come to you. Now you can choose which ones are better, but they always have a universal kind of ability that has evolved through down the ages. So it's kind of like, if you get in danger, you're going to get adrenaline. Your spirit forms give you that adrenaline. If you become afraid and there's a scared version of you, there is a spirit form in you that has evolved of fight or flight, where to go to live, and that will talk to you, or you will be it. You'll be in this altered state while that phenomenon is happening. And technically it's not wrong. You may use the adrenaline wrong. That often has to do with the meme spirit forms. You know what I mean? Trainings or ideas you come up with and here may not be so great, or they may be really great. But the adrenaline, the heightened senses, all those things that happen during that state are not wrong. So the spirit forms that have evolved, as opposed to meme-based spirit forms, are more powerful and more true because they're kind of like abstractions or principles. We're now going to start bringing into how would you feel this and how does it apply to pod layer theory. Well, let's talk about the pod powers. You have, for example, say Z. We mentioned that power flow, that it comes from the concept of the system. So we'll start here. Concepts. I think most people are like, yeah, concept of system. I know what that is. Yeah, and I have a concept of system before I did anything here. If you see like even primitive, like, you know, more primitive primates than ourselves, they do systemic work. You can clearly see them like organizing things and doing other things you clearly would call Z activities. Very childlike, you know, a level of ability, but it is that kind of brain work, that kind of psyche work. So that means that it's a concept that can be worked to a greater or lesser degree. That's a spirit form aspect. So you can grab at it like Plato's form and try to apply it. Now, the main thing I want you to focus on here is the idea of, particularly focusing on the power flows from before, the concept of something, but the power of the concept of something to move you, to give you energy, to give you impetus, to give you urgency. Okay, so all the pod powers you mentioned, they have a concept. The reason why I started them all like that is to make you understand these powers have a will to shine. This is very important. When I say something has a will to shine, you're kind of like, yeah, okay, that makes sense. But it's a slight semantic delicacy here. And I want to make sure I highlight it, because I could not highlight it, but I want to highlight it. That's the beginning of talking to yourself. So long story short, anytime you are talking to yourself in any way, that's actually spirit forming. So when the concept of the system or perfection or harmony, in those things, they move you to do something. You were kind of doing your thing, right? Being you. And then you've often said to me, my knee, almost like her knee was some kind of genie. And you can almost think of this like an AI. Your pot powers have a sort of AI. I mentioned they have an agenda. They have tasks that they do, and therefore they have resources they want. And since we are very sophisticated creatures, the way we understand this often takes a rather autonomous entity kind of form. So for example, kind of the old, poof, pops on your shoulder, talks to you, bad person or good person or anything like that. You really can take that to a much more sophisticated level in that your pod powers do talk to you. So for example, my call to imagine. At this point, I won't try to give it too much of a personality because that might freak us out at this point in the lesson. So we'll add more, but I am going to add more personalizing. But I want you to understand where it even begins. It, for you it's knee, for me it's nigh, is calling like a puppy or a baby dragon or something. Like it's calling to you to go talk to it. So you could say, oh, that's just your imagination. Okay, fine, you can call it whatever you want, but it is touching my conscious self, what we call an apparatus, on the shoulder to say, come here, and you can say yes, right? Or shrug it off. I think everyone understands that basic phenomenon. This is the heart of spirit forming. The idea that you have things present themselves to you in your psyche, and you say yes, no, ask questions, shrug it off, or give it a thumbs up. Whenever you go into a room to be alone and mull over a very important decision, I think most people do this, they kind of like let themselves get calm and let the various things that are of importance in the issue float up and kind of vibe back and forwards, and then you see what you think is the best way to go. Especially in very this is really important to get right. So right there, everyone's spirit forms when it's very, very important to get right. Athletes spirit form very well a lot of times in getting ready for events, and artists who are going to perform, and all kinds of people who are going to engage in things of importance. A mother taking care of a child for the first time, second time, anytime, of course. It's important. And humans have a natural instinct, which they sometimes forget about, which is sad, that when you need to know something, you actually can go ask yourself. That's crucial to the foundation of spirit forming. But unfortunately, most people only do it when they get fired from their job, or they're considering to marry or not marry, or to go to this job, or to go across the country. That's when they actually go do that. But you could get to where you do it much more often, and it's not so laborious. Those who engage, for example, the art as a inner guide, that's a more pleasant way to constantly sort of talk with autonomous entities or the muse or whatever. The muse is not it, by the way. The muse is part of it. Your spirit forming includes art and a great many more things. So I'm going to throw out a few things really quick here just before I move on. This may make sense, these things that talk to you. For example, the concept of the system. Okay, that makes sense to most people. There's also an example of that, a sort of subdivision. And this gets important to spirit forming. Spirit forming is so vast, so powerful, that it's like tracking ocean currents. You've got to get used to tracking molecules of water. Molecules of water. All the way up to oceans and tsunamis and the moon's stuff. That's how complex it is, but it's all affecting the water. And you have tidal currents, and you have individual tributaries, everything, undercurrent, overcurrent. It's just ridiculous. Okay, but that's what you're talking about when you get to the ocean of your mind. And what's above ground, kind of the surface of this earth, that's the conscious mind. And we all have heard, right? What is it, like 85% or something really high? That's water. We're mostly water. That's us. We're mostly unconscious. It's even worse. It's like less than 1%. To nearly infinity on the unconscious side. So on that, just to give you a little example, is within the concept of the system, there's the concept of math. Humans actually come knowing that there is math. That's why, for example, I think a lot of animals have this, but I'll say for sure, definitely animals such as wolves and primates who have pack kind of a thing, they have to know 2 is more than 1. Politics. Politics is a big part of wolf psychology and also primate psychology. So at a very short level, you'd actually have to be able to add, even if you didn't know I was adding. Let's say that's why you didn't really invent math. It's very important. Math doesn't get invented. It gets discovered. Science and math get discovered. Okay, so humans actually do know there's something there. Even primates know there's something there. That's why they go like, yes, more is better. Or that's bigger. They know bigger is got more something than smaller. That's a kind of math. It sounds simple, but that's how we got all to, trigonometry. So trigonometry came from that, figuring like somehow that affects that. If you have that at all, which very early primates do, then you can get all the way to where we are now. It's a smooth evolution. It doesn't mean that all the memes would be there. For example, if we were to wipe out all the textbooks on the planet right now and all the knowledge of math, that would be a loss of a lot of spirit forms. It would be a tragic loss. I mean, just couldn't define the loss, but I'm going conceptual here. That portion of it is gone, which is like you learning to play the piano, the portion where it was a very specific kind of skill based on a piece of equipment or an application. But I think we all know this, if that happened, we would learn it again, because trigonometry is, and humans know that something is. Thus primates know that 4 primates is more than 1 or 2 primates. So once you know that math is there, you can start digging at math. And then you can learn all the more advanced, sophisticated like ones for memes, where you're learning like things, for example, that you don't necessarily need to turn math to. You don't need to turn math to the stars, but you could. And now we talk about the magic of spirit forms. Spirit forms have a lot of connection with principles, abstractions, and concepts. They're basically things we're wired with to be able to know what to do. But that could be used for a great many things. For example, mothers are wired in the human species and many other species, to have a strong attachment to their young to the point of exerting great forces in order to protect it. That can be used to give it more food than it has, to lift a heavy object, superhuman strength, you've heard these stories, to protect a child, or to save lots and lots of their money in a modern currency system and then give all of that work over to that child. The memes I just said are very different, but actually the motivator underneath that, the spirit form of mother protecting, nurturing, and advocating a child, that's the same, and that's most of it. So we talk about the spirit forming continuum. The spirit forms that are learned by the conscious mind in this lifetime, they are like the conscious mind in their power. And the spirit forms that are evolved, they smoothly integrate and go behind and push the learned meme spirit forms, but they are much more powerful. But they're universal, and therefore they have to know how to interact in the world, and that's your job. A few other things we have here is social alchemy groupings. That is a kind of spirit form. We were talking before in doing pod powers and so forth, we're very activity-based or role-based, like you're being a mother or you're being a musician or you're being a hunter, and so you're doing it, you're using various powers. That's something too is, on that real quick, is with spirit forming, a person who is, for example, going to do a dexterous interplay between mind and hands to a rhythm. That could involve a great many powers being all used at once. That combination of all those powers being used has evolved, so that when a person needs to go into that mode, or hunter mode, or mother taking care of baby mode, all the appropriate things come on. Of course you have to realize, oh, that means in this case I give the child milk, or this means I do this. But all the energies and the motivations and the superior knowings, because whenever you get into decision making, for example, there's always a higher knowing. And one thing, for example, I'll use the case of mothers, is mothers have a very high knowing. Whenever a situation comes up and you have to know what to do, you could ask a great many questions to decide how to go with it. But there are rankings of them. And I think most people admit that when a person goes, what should a mother do? That's high. That's a really high decision-making place to make it from. That's what spirit forms are in a lot of ways. They're places within you. So when a person talks from that place, she's talking as a mother. You've heard the term? Yes, she's talking with that spirit form unlocked in her. And so she is channeling that spirit form right then. And it's very, very powerful. And so there's quite a few of those we can get into later. But with going back to these now, the social alchemy bubbles and groupings, is what I just described there is very role-based, right, like mother, okay, but there's also what we'll call motifs. So for example, I'll call motifs and flavors. Let's go with flavors first. Is the spirit form of mother, all humans have that, but it will be different based on if they're male, female, and it'll be different based on their mojo. So for example, being a Nijai female, you're going to actually have very strong relations to the mother spirit form as a role for you. That makes sense. That's like a very powerful heroic role for you to see yourself as, or as. It also relates to you being Nijai. That version of mother or lover or hunter or gatherer, any of those things, is going to be a Nijai version. So it's important. All these will be flavored. And actually, I see the currents overlap. So already we're talking about functional roles, but then we're talking about the different mojos doing that functional role. So there's all kinds of versions of the mother. There's all kinds of versions of father and so forth. Then you actually have the motifs. So let's say that you are a, let's go with gatherer. She's a gatherer, okay? That's a kind of spirit form, and we as primates have been gathering for a very long time, and some of us are really, really good at it. Ni Alpha are very good at gathering. So when she's doing that, any mojo could be in a gatherer spirit form and activating that unconscious power within them that makes them best able to gather. But when you see that happening, I could see that happening to, for example, you and Jonathan and Jaini Christina. And they'd all take on, you could see it like, ooh, they're in gatherer mode, because they'd all activate their knee in different ways and their discernment in different ways. And so that kind of activity would signal a person eager and ready to do gathering. However, especially if you, for example, know mojo reading and why it's so important, that's why we start with it, you would also be able to tell that although they're all doing that, they're doing it differently. This is a Nijai gatherer, a Jaini gatherer, and a Zaini gatherer. All gatherers, but they're flavored that way. Okay, next. That's them separately. Let's put them together now. This is where we start talking about the social alchemy bubbles. You could also have a motif of any of the mojos in gatherer mode or spirit form. But the fact that you, Christina, and Jonathan all are Ni mojos, that means that they have the power of Ni in their top two, in one of the top two positions, then that's a kind of crew. It's a kind of group. Humans have evolved together with their mojos for thousands, millions of years. So the social alchemy has evolved with that. So humans are used to knowing, once you learn to read mojo, you'll be able to do it too. Not only could you read that's her, you would realize that's a bunch of Ni. Those are a bunch of Ni gatherers. If we were to watch a bunch of Vi gatherers, and you can have that, it would feel very, very different. Not just individually, the group of them. A Vi Ji, a Vi Z, and say a Z Vi. And they're all in their gatherer mode. Like they were given some sort of mission, whatever, at work to go gather, and so now they've all in their gatherer mode. It could look very different. So that's how the spirit forms interplay. However, all of them are benefiting from activating that spirit form. Even though that your way of using it's going to be different, if the activity does favor the spirit form of gatherer, being able to summon, to channel that spirit form, that mode, whatever you call it, that state of yourself, then you're going to do way, way better at it. I mean, it's kind of like basic video games. You know, it's like if you're gonna play the games like, you know, a lot of those the fighting games that have like the superpowers, is there's the basic allotment of moves. But if you're gonna be really good, you have to hit the super mega combos. You can't be like a master of the game just doing the basic allotment of moves. And that's kind of what you're talking about. When you go to component and concrete, those are like the basic moves, the basic buttons do. From tacit and on, for tacit and on, we're talking about combos. Do you mean what you can do when you start doing the buttons in certain sequences and certain amazing things happen, such as finding a person interesting. Once that happens, a whole series of mental activities take place because your psyche registers this is an interesting person to talk to. We all do this. And you're a different you. You're a different you if you think this is an interesting person to talk to versus an uninteresting person to talk to. It has a great deal of effect on how much you learn. If your spirit forms feel this person is interesting, they will learn a great deal. I think everyone knows this about themselves. If you're into something, you can do a lot of it. You don't get very tired. You tend to get good at it quickly. If you don't, you can just churn up massive amounts of training or devouring because it's fun, it's pleasurable to do. Spirit forms are that. That's what you're feeling. When something feels very good to you and your psyche and your being, and you notice that you're getting a lot more energy. For example, I'm sitting here and I have certain biochemical ways I'm operating, and you come around, or a bad thing comes on TV, these various things, they affect me. They have not touched me anyway. In no physical way have I been touched, yet my spirits are affected. And that dramatically affects actually the energy levels, the confidence, the mastery, the ability to take in information, make good judgments. So spirit forming is the highest way of understanding yourself. You can understand all other aspects. You can understand peak pathways, spirit forms. We're also gonna get to what we call the chords of calling, different things like, you know, fear and rage, joy, pleasure, passion. But all of those can be understood in spirit forms. Okay, one more thing. Motifs as far as situations. So you have gatherer. That is a spirit form. Everyone has that. You have gatherer as a Nijai. It's a Nijai gatherer. The three of you, Jonathan, actually four of you, Jonathan, Adam, Christina, and Christina, that would be a Ni Mojo gathering party. That's a different spirit form motif than a Vi gathering party. Next, have you started gathering yet? Your gathering, is it going well? Has the gathering ended? Who do you tell? Do you tell? That's part of the gathering process. At each stage, you're a different spirit form. Does that make sense? So if you guys were getting into your gathering spirit form and you just got, say, some assignment or mission to go brainstorm on and get the internet, you're going to summon your gatherer spirit form, but it's going to be a very eager anticipation kind of state. Similar to a bloodhound almost getting ready to like go chase tasty scents. Like, oh goodness, goodness, goodness. Okay. What about once the bloodhound actually finds a scent? What about once the monkey actually finds a nest of something? Then it's uncovering, right? It's more like a digging. So it's different than chasing around finding something that might be there as opposed to, ooh, I found something. That's still gatherer, but it's a different one. It's the gatherer who found something but is uncovering it. And then there's a gatherer who actually takes it and shares it or hoards it. So you have sharing gatherer and you have hoarding gatherer. So already seeing just the incredible complexity and explains all the psychology, all your powers, all your experiences. What I've just gone over there is spirit forming kind of as a concept. I've also mentioned what I'm going to call a few families of spirit forms. Your pod powers can talk to you. That's a language. You can also be talked to by your moods. Moods or modes can incorporate multiple things. So if I'm in a good mood, that can involve multiple powers on my part. Does that make sense? And that's a kind of spirit form. Then you got, what else do we have here? The social alchemy, bubbles, and groups. Now we're talking about spirit forms as not being singular, as being plural, that you can actually have, like G, the people. You can actually have one person, two people, person alone, person with friend. Lots of people, small group, large group, things like this. And then you got situations. Group getting bigger, group getting smaller. Group with harmony, group that is divisive. Those are all spirit forms. And back to when we were early primates, there were early primates of us with very sophisticated knowledge, you can see it even now on the Nature Channel, of are things going good or bad. They have a very complex social interaction and understanding of how things are going. So that spirit form is ancient in us. I mean, so we have that plus a way more evolution of sophistication, so it's really cool. But having said that, I'm now going to get into some of the other families, and then I'm going to focus on one family at the end here. Some of the families of them would be cultural spirit forms, such as heroes and monsters. I think we have a little thing on there that you wrote up there, which is, as I mentioned in the filming, if you go to different cultures and you talk about, for example, a troll or a wise person, they'll have different cultural interpretations of that. Wise people have, I don't know, they sleep with their eyes open. Some people believe that. Wise people live in caves. Wise people don't talk. They live in a forest. Or wise people write lots of books. Does that make sense? So that part's rather meme-based in a way. But the idea that there is wisdom and some people have more of it than the other, and that you interact in a certain way based on that. That's something all humans have, and we've evolved doing that, because when one monkey or chimp actually did something that was smart, the other chimps noticed this. So when that chimp did something else, you'll see it's on the Nature Channel, they'll watch that chimp again. If the one figured out something like a stick and did that, they'll register that somehow that primate did something clever, and they'll pay more attention, because it's smart, especially in collective species, to pay attention to others in your collective who do things well. That's just really, really good to do. Okay, and so it makes sense that we've evolved with that instinct. Okay, some other things. Where it goes now with the heroes and monsters, to finish up, is to highlight again, is those things are all in us. All the heroes that we see that are superhuman in mythology, they're us, and those are metaphors for our powers and higher states of being where we're going with very strong, powerful, deep spirit forms. When you can do that, you can do amazing things. You can do incredible works of art, scientific breakthroughs, physical feats of athleticism that are so far above the norm that they're interpreted as superhuman. So back in ancient times, before we had journalism, and certainly mojo journalism, when some person can jump like 4 feet higher than all the other ones, it's very easy for that to become like 8 feet, 10 feet, 20 feet. The person can jump over, mountains. I mean, because it was stunning enough for them to all think, whoa, I can't believe I'm seeing that. Same thing, a person actually can recite, like the bards can, hours and hours, like days of eloquent rhetoric. To do that, you have to spirit form. You actually, like most artists, if you want to be able to perform that kind of thing, you have to have a really good connection with your spirit forms, your inner art, your inner genius, whatever you want to call it. But if you're not doing that, then people who are seeing that have no way to explain such a massive discrepancy between that human and someone else. For example, in that movie, it's pretty good, 13th Warrior, with Antonio Banderas, G'nai, is they thought that these people who turned to be Picts, Aboriginals, were not human. They thought that they were like some sort of creatures because they came in the night and they did these savage things and these horrid things, and the way they did things, the way they lived, seemed like a beast. But what turned out is these were a race of people that had not been civilized in what we classically would think of that, and they had set their memes to the animals around them. And so one of the main ones they had, they set themselves to the bear. They saw themselves as bears, so they learned how to be by trying to be like bears, which kind of made it a little bit twisted, obviously. However, one thing that 13th Warrior kind of shows, which is really kind of cool, is the humans up to that point, until the Antonio Banderas character manages to slay one and actually see it's just a person. But up till then, they were almost powerless to work with it. They were just undone. In fact, the Vikings who agreed to do it were considered so manly and honorable and brave because they were pretty much signing up for a suicide mission. You can't kill bear spirits. Because they thought there was some sort of like weird half bear. you know, like werewolves, they were werebears. That's what they thought they were. And basically, when a human thinks something's a werebear, can you beat a werebear? No, werebear's not human. But once they recognize it's just humans doing weird stuff, that you can fight, that you can beat. So that's kind of fascinating. I like how that was done. But that's pretty much all the mythologies and things that we've learned. This does not denigrate them, because spirituality is vitally important, and those were ways that people did at different times, and we're now trying to offer a really enlightening and cutting-edge way now, one that hopefully will keep expanding and remain relevant and current. But at the end of the day, that's what's going on. So, where's going with that? Oh, just basically that one thing you'll start to benefit from learning how to mojo read is to be able to see spirit forms on people. For example, when you see a friend of yours and they go into one of their powers, and when they go into that power, they change in their attitude, and it can be pleasant for you or unpleasant. You'll learn to think of them, and they are kind of as two different people living inside that person, with one master person being in charge of all that. We'll get to in a second how that works, but that is how people are wired. They actually have many of them in them of varying ranks and power, based on how long they've been evolved with us and their position in us doing what we do. All humans are born with a will to shine, which means we're built to do something beautiful and awesome and wonderful, and we're powerful at doing it. We're built with amazing abilities to do that adventure and be the heroes of it and win, and therefore peak. Before we move on to the rest, there's just a couple ones to fill in to make sure we get the whole kind of spectrum here, is symbols and nature. Is not only can you have, for example, one human, two humans, four humans, big humans, little humans, whatever, you can also apply that to animals. Like, oh, that's a baby giraffe, that's a grown-up giraffe, that's a pack of giraffes. Those are all spirit form motifs that humans have, and we would need to have evolved with that. If we had evolved not being able to tell who was bigger, stronger, smarter, faster, nicer, meaner within our own collective, we wouldn't do very well, and humans are very social. We are very good at that. And not only would we need to know that, we would need to know, and that's why we currently dominate the earth, in case you're wondering, we know how other creatures work, that they have ways. That's important. Spirit forms can be thought of as ways. So not only are tigers built with claws and rhinos built with tusks and so forth, they have a way about them. So chimpanzees, they're built to swing in trees, for example. That's a physical thing, but there's other elements to their psychology and beyond the psychology, just the spirit forms of it, of how to be a chimpanzee or monkey. So, for one thing, it does involve the same kind of interest in activities of a tiger or a rhino. That's fundamental. Their spirit forms are not into that same thing. If you're into it, you're really powerful. If you're not into it, you're weak. Monkeys are into being monkeys. Rhinos are into the things that it takes to be a good rhino. Humans are weird this way in that we've kind of trained ourselves to not listen to our spirit forms. And that's because of a lot of things, but one that I'll just beat on right now is a concept that a lot of spiritual models have put out, which is wrong, is that humans are either innately savage and therefore need a greater way to enlighten their savage beings, or that they are at best just there and could be anything. And so for them it's a question of equal measure, good, bad, could go good, could go bad. So we have savages who need things to make them unsavage, or really could go either way. Really there's nothing pushing you towards being noble or unnoble. These just are. Blank slate. That's bullshit. Both those are complete bullshit. Spirit forms are the way they are in humans because they impel us to be our heroic selves and to be a heroic tribe. So a tribe of heroes. I keep going back to this. If you look at most other animals, they don't have a problem being heroic at what they are. Of course, they have problems with other creatures impinging on them and natural law, not giving them food and stuff. But they don't usually have a problem being a heroic gazelle if you're a gazelle. So all creatures that Gaia created, the cosmos created, are built to be a heroic version of them. That's how they got this far. And humans are the most advanced ones, so we've gotten the furthest. So our spirit form abilities, technology, whatever you want to call it, our spiritual self, it is designed to produce wonderful, beautiful things. That's what the majority of our programming, of our being, is made up of. It's kind of like getting a program that's meant to do media production and having, according to some of those other ways of looking at it, that it doesn't work at all innately, which isn't true. It's like a Savage model. We work really well, that's just stupid. The next one is that half of the thing is devoted to bad stuff, troubleshooting. That would be a very stupid program. I don't know any other animal out there, I don't know any trees, I don't know anything that works like that in evolution. If you evolved this far, it's because the shearing forces of natural law haven't killed you yet. You must be spiffy. So the spirit forms actually show you the highest things you're able to achieve. And as a well-built construct of natural law, most of your programming is for bounty, for getting things, for making things, for improving your lot, the system's lot, everything. It's for constructive, not destructive. It's all mostly constructive. Now, there are some deconstructive elements. This is what I call the emergency program, and we'll get into that a little bit later when we start talking about the Enlightenment Elevator, the main focus here. But long story short, that isn't most of the, I'm just going to go ahead and go there. Well, anyway, most of the programming is devoted to the good part, what you're supposed to be doing, and there is troubleshooting, emergency help section, but that's a small part, and it doesn't rank very high. That's not the purpose of the program. That's not the purpose of the creature. That's not the purpose of you. All right, so now, real fast, is just that not only do you have that, you also have pack of drafts. You also have mountains, lakes, things like that, sun coming up, the moon, so forth. They've been around since we've been here. They were around way before we were, so all the evolution of us, we've been seeing that. That's in our psyche, it's in our being. Does that make sense? The cosmos, we've been seeing it ever since we got here. So there's no point that wasn't in our view screen. So our view screen of our psyche is literally seared with the cosmos. It's all around us, like math. That's why we have math, because it's around everywhere. Even if you don't know what gravity is, there was a concept of it. It's a concept of whatever does that. Does that make sense? And since that was here, we weren't born on Mars or the moon, so humans evolved with gravity. So even something that maybe didn't have a name, it's a concept. It's not even a symbol now. It's simply something that affects the psyche, has affected the psyche, and the psyche knows this and has developed a best practices, has evolved a best practices. And those evolved best practices come to you as internal dialogues. Next. That's a lot of stuff and you're like, whoa, that's way complicated. Now I'm going to make it easier for you because there is a shortcut. That's nearly infinite, and you can already see this, like, oh my goodness. The elevator, this is our little friendly name for it, it's our little nickname, we call it the Enlightenment Elevator. There is a basic way you're supposed to operate, and you are in charge. You're the sheriff or the chief person, steward, you got the shiny token, and your job is to interact with the world and then go back to your unconscious and figure out what you're supposed to be doing and then keep that interplay. There are a few major spirit forms that occupy that pipeline, that highway. These spirit forms dwarf and encompass all the other spirit forms. And so they're the ones we focus on. And when we say spirit forming, we're usually referring to these, actually, the Enlightenment Elevator spirit forms. But I felt compelled in Spirit Forming 101 to set the scene that you really can't understand them if you don't understand all the things they encompass. Because, for example, if I say things like the Daryu, people tend to get a very personified view. But it doesn't. It actually incorporates all these other families. The Enlightenment Elevator spirit forms, they incorporate any and all other spirit form families for their agenda. So there's these sort of what I call mega agendas. And those mega agendas are the most powerful autonomous entities. And within them are multitudes of autonomous entities within them. So what are these biggies? Okay, well, should be, but often isn't. You. You should be a fairly biggie, but it's not as big as it should be for most people. And those who are even, it's not that big, they think they're that big. So the major problem is what you think of as you is not as big as you think it is, but it's way smaller than it should be. So if that makes sense, think of that for a while. Okay. This is what we call the apparatus. And when I say you, in popular theory, we're usually referring to the apparatus. And the apparatus can be thought of as the consciousness you developed when you woke up. So this should be the most powerful of all the spirit forms in this lifetime. So you evolved with your mojo, the pod powers, your unique own way of that. Everyone's unique. That evolved to get to that point. So there are a lot of characters, spirit forms, entities that are already set to go. They're what we call the unconscious enlightenment spirit forms. I'm just going to shorten it to the enlightenment. So they're the unconscious enlightenment ones. The apparatus is one of the two more conscious of the spirit forms. It's the apparatus and the Mazut. The apparatus is what you think of as you whenever you go inside your own head. So, real quick, you know how you go to your office and you have your office you, but when you come home, you put that down because that's not really you. That's the Mazut. The Mazut is what you can put down. You also learn those in this lifetime, but you consider them to be kind of like roles you play, and you're aware that they're roles you play. Mazuts can have levels, as all the mojos can. We call low and high. So you have a low Mazut and high Mazut. A low Mazut would be one that you are clearly aware of, such as I go into a certain character when I talk to that person or that family member, or when I go to that job or whatever. On the higher end, what we call high Mazut would be one, for example, like your name. Now, whether you know it or not, you did learn that. And you can change your name. For example, what happens if you legally change your name? Then you're no longer that. But you're still you. You're still that creature from when you were born. And you are aware of that. You're aware that, like, I have all that time that I was here, those experiences and those lessons learned. So the part of you that's aware of the continuum of your consciousness, that's the apparatus. And things that you step into and out of from that consciousness, you're aware you're doing it. Like, you know, being a role to a lover, or role to a friend or a colleague. Those are Mazuts. And they can be beneficial, they can also be very restraining. We'll get to that later. Right now, let's go to the major pantheon. So those are the first two of the enlightenment ones. You are the apparatus. The apparatus has more energetic value, more spirit form energy than the Mazut, because you have been building that spirit form since you were a baby. Since literally you were in the womb. The first, any kind of conscious, vaguest consciousness, that's I'm here. The first time you in any way noted I am here began the apparatus building itself up, you know, like doing weightlifting. Like you playing the piano, that's a Mazut. So that's as strong as you were doing that. And there's like no Mazut that you've been doing as long as you've been you. So the apparatus energetically has more time in rank, so to speak, than all the Mazuts. But before we move on, the apparatus also has a special thing. It was chosen to do this. That's why you're able to choose which Mazut you feel like slipping into or slipping out of. Because you have authority, and that comes from higher up the Enlightenment elevator. But just know, the reason why you can do that, the reason why you have a shiny token, the reason why you can go on the elevator, the reason why you even know the elevator is there, is because you were chosen to do this. So you're the hero. That's awesome. But it does mean that everything else I'm about to tell you of the Enlightenment one, they're all more energetically powerful than you. You must learn how to dialogue with them. You must use your shiny token masterfully, wisely, in an enlightened way in order to unlock them, to get them to dialogue with you in the proper ways and give you their gifts. Now, what are these? So moving up the elevator, they're basically going to be truths, and truths have a weight to them, and that's what we call the Enlightenment elevator. And so we're going to call these holders of these truths. So the first one is going to be kind of rough. so it doesn't feel like you're maybe going up, but you are. It's the Daryu. And the Daryu is the emergency programming. It's the spirit forms that are too heavy for you to hold. And the reason they're too heavy is because they relate to things that are usually unpleasant. And you need to be able to take care of them. Maybe you don't want to or don't know how to. So the Daryu will give you that information, although the way it dialogues with you can be a bit rough, and we'll get into that later on. But that's necessary, and you have to learn how to dialogue and get past it in order to get to the greater vistas that you're meant for, which is the other. Your others we call like your inner art. It relates to the unconscious powers you have in a lot of ways. When we talk about the peak pathways, the return waves, and things like that, that has a lot to do with the other. And these are the gifts you get from your unconscious art, your unconscious genius. These are things that inspire you, that motivate you, that just get you going. They're the reward you were built to get, being the hero you are built to be. The Fumasta is the last of the enlightenment spirit forms that you can talk to. The other, very powerful, gives you all your art, all your genius, but it's still you and it. It's a state of non-duality. In the Fumasta state, your inner guide, your inner master, your inner mentor, you see the whole vista of you and you have a state of non-duality. And you can still dialogue in this. The dialogues get more fantastical and good as you go up. They tend to get more concrete, banal, unpleasant, and just mundane. The art, as awesome it is mundane to the Fumasta. Fumasta is concerned with the overall vision of you, which you consider your spiritual view of yourself. So to that, art seems mundane. Now to the art of you, the emergency programming of how to keep like things from stubbing your toe in the world and stuff like that, that's mundane. Does that make sense? But it still is regarding your heroic mission. When the apparatus goes to the Mazout, Mazouts are with the world. The world doesn't even recognize that you're on a heroic mission unless you tell it so. So in that context, the Mazouts are more mundane than the Daryu. The Daryu is unpleasant, but it is completely aware of their heroic mission. Mazouts aren't. They might actually think they work for Kmart. After that, you can't dialogue, you merge. And you just go into wholeness, and you are home. And that begins with a shiny baby, the all of you. When we say mojo, we often mean the top two powers, but it can also mean, in this context, the all of you. Because you only have a very small conscious portion of all your mojo, and there's all of it that is there to be given to you, and it's an infinite gift that you can just keep getting more and more and more of. In fact, you have to get used to swelling your vessel up to take more. It's like lifting weights, metaphysical weightlifting, but it's the best thing because you can peak higher. You can literally, you're like a spiritual, artistic, visionary athlete. And this is basically like the ding, 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 and you are in it. At that point, 1 minute, that's fine, great way to leave it. The mergings, you are a shiny baby, pure bliss. You are what you're built to be. You are in the all of you, and it is perfect, and it is beautiful, and it is good, and it is awesome. And it is whole, it is complete. And that complete wholeness doesn't stop. You can expand it, and if you do, you go into the complete wholeness of everyone else. Social alchemy, the tribe of humanity. The wholeness keeps going, and that, if you keep going, goes into all the other animals, and the plants and trees of Gaia, all these systems of this planet. And if you keep going, that goes into the cosmos. Those knowings tend to be an energy language. Kind of like, just pure bliss and drooling, but it's the bee's knees. But one drop of this, I think the Buddhists would call this first bardo, and then the spirit forms are are dialoguing at the ones beneath it. But the energy, one drop of that energy, fuels all the dialoguing spirit forms like to super crazy levels. And correspondingly, higher spirit forms, each one below it, a drop of the one above it makes the one below it supercharged. So crazy awesome stuff. You want to do this,